Welcome to this week's midweek Space Startup News. As usual, I'll be going over some space news articles I found on websites and on social media posts. First of all, we're on X. You can follow at Space Startup Hub, and I post links to my videos on there. So with that, let's get into the first news article this week. And that is on a new company called Space Cowboy Corp. So here is the founder and CEO of Cowboy Space Corp, Baju Bhatt. Now, you may recognize him. I certainly recognize him from this photo here. It's this guy here. 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth from the left. That's Baju Bhatt. And this is a team photo of Aetherflux. So let's have a look at Aetherflux. And they work on power beaming satellites. They also recently announced Galactic Brain, some kind of constellation of AI compute. But now he's in charge of Cowboy Space Corp. So this was confusing at first to me until I realized that Aetherflux has been rebranded and is now called Cowboy Space Corp. And if we read this article, we can get all the details. So let's just go through this article. It's titled, Cowboy Space Corporation raises $275 million Series B for vertically integrated orbit data centers and rockets. So the funding for the company formerly known as Aetherflux. So that now explains what happened to Aetherflux. So the article says, Cowboy Space Corporation, the orbital infrastructure company, announced $275 million in Series B financing. The company, which operated as Aetherflux since its founding in 2024, is also unveiling its new name and brand. Cowboy Space Corporation is pioneering vertically integrated infrastructure to power and run AI compute in orbit. The company is developing a constellation of low Earth orbit satellites that harness solar energy, and a purpose-built launch vehicle to deliver them. Compute payloads designed specifically for the space environment, and the rocket's upper stage and data center payload are designed as a single vehicle. In orbit, each upper stage becomes a 1 megawatt data center. So Cowboy is also collaborating with NVIDIA to deploy NVIDIA Space One Vera Rubin modules, bringing state-of-the-art AI infrastructure to the low Earth orbit environment. And we have a quote from the CEO Baju Bhatt, and he says, our approach starts from a blank sheet where the unique requirements of data centers in orbit drive the form and function of the overall system. He goes on to say the rocket and the data center are a single design from day one. It's a first principles departure from the traditional constellation model, unquote. And we have a quote from Jan Hammer, who's a partner at Index Ventures. And he says that the demand for AI compute and energy begins to outstrip what terrestrial infrastructure can support, unquote. And then at the bottom it says the company plans to launch its first satellite to orbit later this year to demonstrate space-to-Earth power beaming. And that mission is really from Aetherflux, the previous name of the company before the rebranding. So anyway, that is the article from Business Wire. So there's obviously some branding around cowboys and Texans and so on. They're all wearing hats. And you can see Baju Bhatt there, front row, the third from the left. And we have this expo, so let's just read what it says. Full stack architecture. Our purpose-built launch vehicle is engineered from first principles for the space environment. The rocket's upper stage and data center payload operate as a single vehicle, not as a delivery truck and its cargo. This eliminates redundant mass and optimizes the power and compute delivered to orbit. Once in space, each upper stage becomes a 1 megawatt data center. By owning our manufacturing and dedicated launch sites, we vertically integrate core technologies that enable deploying compute at scale. And from their website, we have some more information. So it says, from the trailhead to outer space, traditional architecture treats the rocket as a workhorse and the satellites as freight. In our system, the rocket's upper stage is the satellite itself. It's a megawatt-class data center with active thermal management and integrated compute, designed as one unified vehicle from the ground up. We trim the fat on redundant structure and avionics, dedicating every possible kilogram of compute to low Earth orbit. And they have this graphic on Stampede, which is the name of their power constellation in orbit. Stampede is a constellation of satellites that harness abundant solar power in low Earth orbit to run on-orbit GPU data centers. With each launch, Stampede grows the power and compute capacity for humanity. That is the mission of Cowboy Space Corp. So I'll keep an eye on their progress, and let's move on to the next story this week. Okay, we have some updates from Lunar Outpost on their X account. So let's have a look at what they're posting. Myself in the corner. So this post was from today and it says, new lunar terrain vehicle unlocked. Introducing the Lunar Outpost Pegasus LTV, purpose-built to provide astronauts with safe, highly achievable mobility to lay the foundation for a permanent moon base. Pegasus is named after the winged horse of Greek mythology, a symbol associated with reach, capability, and prosperity. It is the trusted steed that will enable Artemis missions to go further, operate longer, and explore more boldly than ever before. Designed to operate for at least 1 year on the moon and traverse over 900 kilometers, 100 times the distance the Apollo-era LRV, covered across all missions. Pegasus is ready to drive Artemis toward a moon base. And there's attached video which we have got, so let's just watch that video now, bring it up. So this is a new vehicle design. The old design was called Eagle. This is a simplified LTV. I don't see a robotic arm. And there is a Pegasus there. So that is what the vehicle looks like. And the reason they have a new design is because of another pivot that NASA announced at the ignition event. And that's a pivot on LTVs, or lunar terrain vehicles. Previously, NASA wanted a gold-plated rover, which has a robotic arm, can last 10 years, can have crew on board or be fully autonomous, teleoperated, so all the bells and whistles. So now, at least for phase 1, they are de-scoping the rover to something simpler so they can get a rover on the moon as quickly as possible. It looks like NASA has decided they need a lot of rovers and they need them soon. So if you have a look at this slide from the ignition event, LTV procurements. So LTV opportunities. So a new draft proposal was issued on the ignition event day. There are proposals on a more simplified variant of both crewed and uncrewed rovers. On-ramp RFP, that's request for proposal, to increase vendor pool from phase 2 LTVs planned for 2027. Foresee task order competitions every 18 to 24 months for future rover deliveries as moon-based capability needs evolve. So NASA has pivoted to a 3-phase approach to the moon. So the first phase, which is now until 2028, this will be robotic landers for research, tech demos, and surveying, those kinds of missions. Then phase 2 will begin to see the habitat land on the moon. And then phase 3 will build out the whole base with power grids, a nuclear power generator, and a lot more infrastructure. So first of all, let's look at Lunar Terrain's Eagle. This is their original design for NASA, which is a very robust, very capable vehicle, and we can see it here as well. And then we've got some images of the crew area, and you can see they've got controls on the side there. So now Lunar Outpost have come up with a simplified version called Pegasus that will be easier to produce, and they can get it to the moon quicker. We do have another X post from Lunar Outpost. It says to achieve NASA's goal of building a moon base, mass production of lunar rovers must start now, and Lunar Outpost is ready to deliver. With more lunar rover missions than any company in the world and manufacturing facilities in Colorado, Texas, Australia, and Europe, we're positioned to mass produce spaceflight proven robotic rovers alongside our partners, accelerating Artemis infrastructure by orders of magnitude. Backed by low unit cost, a vertically integrated supply chain, high cadence production, and short integration timelines, Lunar Outpost is scaling the mobility infrastructure that will drive Artemis and a permanent moon base. And there's an attached image here. You can see a small lunar rover here. Then there's a Swift rover. At the bottom you have the Eagle rover that I just shown. This OWL rover is new to me. I've not seen this design before, but it appears to be a mid-class workhorse purpose-built for excavation, grading, compaction, and large-scale site preparation, which is exactly what you need for a moon base. So this is good news that they're working on these excavation type vehicles that will be needed for lunar roads, landing pads, and other infrastructure, and just general site preparation. So Lunar Outpost already has a mission to the moon. They booked a SpaceX Starship moon mission, and this was in 2024. Lunar Outpost signs with SpaceX for Starship moon mission, and it says Lunar Outpost, the industry leader in lunar surface mobility, commercial space robotics, and space resources, today announced it has signed an agreement with SpaceX to deliver Lunar Outpost lunar terrain vehicle to the moon aboard a SpaceX Starship for launch and landing. So that's an update on Lunar Outpost, one of the 3 LTV companies bidding for a NASA contract. The other two companies are Intuitive Machines with their Moonracer LTV and Astrolab with their Flex rover. So we'll see what happens. It looks like NASA wants to onboard more LTV companies. They need a lot of rovers and they need them as quickly as possible. That's very good news for space startups that are working on mobility for the moon and later Mars. Okay, so let's move on to the final story this week. And finally, we have a story from EuropeanSpaceflight.com. So let's just bring it up here and read it. Put myself in the corner. By Andrew Parsonson is OHB joins Dassault Aviation's VORTEX Spaceplane initiative. And you can see the render of the spaceplane here. This is a German spaceplane, and you can see the service module at the back, which will be provided by OHB, which is a German aerospace company, and Dassault is also German. So let's read what the article says. So OHB has agreed to develop the service module, bit here, for Dassault Aviation's VORTEX S spaceplane, which the company plans to pitch to the European Space Agency. The vehicle is designed to transport cargo to and from space stations in low Earth orbit, and to conduct autonomous free-flying missions, and potentially to ferry crews to and from space. An initial subscale demonstrator of the spaceplane, called the VORTEX D, is being developed by the company. The demonstrator is expected to be launched in 2028 and has a total project cost of €70 million. The companies seek to secure ESA backing for the project, and discussions are also underway with other major European space companies to expand the team. And we have a quote here from Dassault Aviation CEO Eric Trappier. With the VORTEX S proposal to ESA, we aim to strengthen Europe's space capabilities, unquote. Dassault Aviation said VORTEX S would be capable of ground transport to space stations and of autonomous orbital free-flyer missions. In May 2023, we had ESA's Low Earth Orbit Cargo Return Service Initiative, and this was for the development of a sovereign European space cargo transport capability. In May 2024, the agency awarded 2 Phase 1 contracts to the exploration company and Thales Alenia Space, with each company receiving €25 million. Early 2026 was Phase 2 of the project, and that was open to all bidders. 2 options for a demonstration mission were proposed. The first would be to the International Space Station first quarter of 2029, and the second would be a future commercial space station with a mission to be carried out by the end of 2031. So that is the article from EuropeanSpaceflight.com. And with all these articles, I will link to them in the video description. So I've done a number of videos recently on space stations and European space stations. So it's good that Europe will have cargo vehicles from the exploration company, maybe from Thales Alenia, maybe from Dassault Aviation, to send cargo and potentially crew to a European space station or to a commercial space station. The other point to mention is NASA doesn't think there's any viable market for commercial space stations, at least not for the next 5 to 10 years. So we'll have to see what ESA is going to do about that. As I've said in my videos, I believe the best option is for a European-owned space station, which is one of the possible solutions. ESA has this post-ISS study that should be reporting later in the year. And of the 3 options, the third option was a European-led or ESA-led space station. The other 2 options did rely on commercial space stations. I think those options are not good for Europe because I don't think commercial space stations launch, or if they do, I don't think they will be that successful, at least not without NASA funding. And NASA seems to be much more focused on the moon rather than low Earth orbit. So we'll just have to see what happens with European space stations and European cargo vehicles and potentially crew vehicles. But anyway, that's all the news I have for this week. So please leave your comments down below and we can discuss on the weekly live stream this Saturday. So thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.